Welcome to Common Sense Christianity. This is Steve. Today we're going to be continuing our series on narcissism, and we're going to be actually talking about narcissism and abortion. There are two primary camps in the abortion debate. First, you have the pro-life, those who oppose abortion, and on the other side, you have the pro-choice folks who advocate for abortion on demand. There's actually one primary and many secondary issues in this debate. The primary issue is, which both sides disagree with, is what is that fetus? What, at the moment of conception, what is the fetus? Is it its own individual person? Or is it merely a conglomeration of cells in the body that has not yet achieved personhood? And if you look at the pro-choice folks, they will only advocate that the child is a person once it comes out of the womb. But before that, it is not a person. While the pro-life people say that at that moment of conception, that is now an individual, a human being. Howbeit small, it is still a human being and should enjoy all of the rights and privileges that a human being has, which includes, according to our Constitution, the right to life, the right to pursue happiness. And so this is the major difference between the two sides, and all the other differences kind of result from how one views that fetus that is in the mother's womb. The pro-choice folks will say that they will say things like it is a woman's right to choose because it is a woman's body. And yes, a woman does have a right to her own body. But if that individual within the womb, if that fetus, I'm not even going to say fetus because that's a term that dehumanizes what is actually in the fetus. So if that baby is a person, then although it is a part of the mother's womb, although it's growing, it is its own autonomous person, and therefore should not be murdered. Listen to some of these statistics. In 2014, 18.9% of U.S. pregnancies ended in abortion. 18.9% ended in abortion. Here's some other statistics. 9 countries in the world have a higher rate of abortion than we have in the United States. And these are Bulgaria, Cuba, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Romania, Russia, Sweden, and the Ukraine. What's not included in here is China because we don't have good statistics of it, but it's estimated that that rate is much higher than 19.2%. Some estimate that it might be as high as 41%. In terms of states, the highest number of abortions happened in California and New York and Florida, some of the more liberal states, while in Wyoming and South Dakota and North Dakota, they had the lowest number of abortions in the United States. Let's just talk about New York, my home state. Approximately 37.4% of all pregnancies in New York City ended in abortion. 37.4%. Since Roe versus Wade in 1973, altogether about 56 million abortions in the United States. The highest percentage of abortions by age from 20 to 24 years old is 32.7% of all abortions. Then next is from 25 to 29 years old. They had 25.9. And then the next is 30 to 34 years old, accounts for 16.8% of abortions. Here's an interesting statistic. Black women were 3.75 times more likely to have an abortion than white women in 2013. If you notice, many of the abortion centers, aka Planned Parenthood, are in urban areas, which gives rise to the fact that the founder of Planned Parenthood Margaret Sanger, was a racist and wanted to eliminate or reduce the size of the black population through abortion. We'll talk about that in another video, but that's an important dynamic when considering the amount of black folks that have abortions and the amount of abortion centers in the black community. Here's an additional statistic. You might think that Christians would be more so opposed to abortion, but listen to this. In 2014, 30% of aborting women identified themselves as Protestant, and 24% identified themselves as Catholics, meaning that abortion knows no real gender or religion. Christians are having abortions sometimes at a higher rate than anybody else, which is another depressing fact, which leads rise to the idea of who really is a Christian. But that's a topic for another video. So now let's look at the abortion in terms of narcissism, and why I think that it is a highly narcissistic attitude that underlies abortion in the United States and in the West as a whole. Now, I've heard many arguments, as I'm sure you have, about abortion, namely that it is a woman's right to choose, and that it is a woman's body, and that they should have the ability and the right to have an abortion at will, and that it should not be a man's decision, and it's a health decision. It's strictly about a woman's health and a woman's right to choose. But let's look at some of the reasons, in which I would say most of them are narcissistic and go along with our narcissistic age, as to why women have an abortion. So, as it turns out, it is only 0.5% of all of abortions have anything to do with the victim being raped. And rape is a terrible thing. I mean, extremely terrible. And a person should be locked up, or worse if they rape a woman. But it's only 0.5% of all the abortions. Another 3% are because of fetal health problems, meaning that there's an illness in that fetus and it would have to be aborted, or it might impact the mother's life. Another 4% are for physical health problems, and that, I believe, has to do with the mother being ill and perhaps not being able to carry the child to term. Therefore, the child needs to be aborted, much like the fetal health problem. Now, the rest of the breakdown, in my opinion, has to do with the narcissism in our culture that is indicative in just about every area of our life and culture. So listen. 4% of the women that have abortions say it would interfere with their education or their career, which, in my opinion, is a narcissistic attitude to have, because you're putting yourself first over the life of a baby. The next 7% say they're not mature enough to raise a child, which is pretty interesting, because that same 7% who are not mature enough to raise a child are indeed mature enough to engage in the act of creating that child. So there's, to me, is a disconnect, and there is a cause and effect. If you're not doing the thing that you do to have baby, then you will not have a baby. The next is 8% don't want to be a single mother, which kind of goes in line with the not mature enough, in that you are mature enough and in your right mind enough to engage in the act of sex. But when it all boils down to it, you decide that you're not yet ready to be a single mother, which to me is a narcissistic attitude, just like it would be to say my educational career come first. Next, you're saying the next 19% say that they're done having children, which means that you might have 2 kids and you get pregnant for a third, and you say, oh, well, I can't afford that third kid, or I can't afford to have another kid. But the strange thing about that is that we live in a materialistic culture where we say we do have enough money, or we do have the wherewithal to get those material things that we want, whether it be a car, house, vacation, whatever. We have the wherewithal to say, yes, I'm going to get that, or yes, I'm going to get that promotion. But when it comes to having a child, we say, no, we're not quite ready for that, or we're done having another child. We don't want any more. We want our 2.5 kids and to live comfortably in our suburban home or in our condo or wherever it is that we're living, and we just can't have another child. And here is one that is almost similar to that. 23% say they have abortion because they can't afford a baby. And like I said, in our materialistic culture, we will work hard to get whatever we want. We don't want any inconveniences in our lives. We don't want to be burdened down with anything except those things that make us happy. Not realizing that, in my opinion, a baby is one of the most fulfilling and happiest things that a person can do. It means that you now have to put others before yourself. You have to dedicate time, effort, love to that child, and that goes against the narcissistic culture that we are living in. And then the highest percentage say that they are not ready for a child, which is 25%. So a quarter of all abortions are the reason that they have abortions indicated as we're not ready for a child. And to me, that encompasses all of the other reasons kind of put together as a, I'm not ready, I have my career, I don't want to be a single mother, or I'm finished having children. This to me kind of encompasses all of the other ones in a more defined way. And then there's 6% other. In my opinion, abortion is a terrible thing, and it's causing a stain in our culture, and that God is highly displeased with this. And this is, of course, it's coming from my own Christian perspective. But even if you look at it logically, abortion, we tried to dress it up with nice words that don't sound too offensive. Like I stated, the woman's right to choose, right to life, and all of these other things. But if you look at abortion, what it really is, it's taking a life. You are snatching that life out of a mother's womb, in whatever means that abortion is done. And it is absolutely wrong. It goes against the grain of how we believe as a people, and that is that every life is important. But with abortion, every life is not important. And based on our own whims and our own narcissistic reasoning, we have said that it is okay. So let me just make this quick analogy. I'm nearly done with this video. Let me make a quick analogy of a practice that we saw in ancient history that's recorded in the Bible. And if you read your Bible, especially in the Old Testament, do a word search under causing children to pass through the fire, and you will see that this was a practice in ancient times where what people did in order to worship their god, which in many cases this god was called Molech, Molech. It is said that they would cause their children to pass through the fire, and what that means is that they would create a great big fire, and in order to appease this god or to get blessings from this god, they would sacrifice their children and put them in these vats of fire. All the while people are screaming and reveling and having sexual orgies and making loud noises so as not to hear the cries of the baby who were being burned to death. So in this case, it was these people's own desire to please this false god that they thought that they had to sacrifice their children to this particular God, and the way they did that was brutal, called brutal way, putting these children in the fire and thinking because of their own narcissistic needs to feel like they were doing what the gods wanted, and that so that these gods could bless them, they were killing their own children. But you know what? It's just like today. Oh, we don't worship these gods of stone or gods that are made up in our minds. We worship our own selves. We are the gods, and we have determined that a baby based on our own needs and wants should be sacrificed, should be aborted, because we don't feel like we can take care of that baby, or we don't feel like it's the right time, or we don't feel like a baby would be convenient for us right now. So what do? We are the gods of our own selves, and we abort the baby. How terrible have we got in our society where we can justify this in our minds and hearts, and just justify it on a societal level without realizing that there are so many consequences to our actions, consequences in terms of the life that child will not have based on our own needs and our own wants. Listen to what Psalm 127 verse 3 says. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. So children are a blessing, and those of us who have children know that is indeed the case, because children also, just as we teach them, they also teach us. They teach us how to give of ourselves and to have compassion and how to love. There is nothing to be compared between the love of a mother and a father to a child. Nothing. And when we deprive ourselves of that based on our own needs and wants, we are not only doing society wrong, we are not only doing wrong ourselves and murdering that child, but we're also doing wrong to ourselves when we deprive ourselves of the blessing of children. So to those of you listening to me, and to those of you who will hope forward this video to other people, I want you to know two things. I want you to know, one, that children are a blessing from the Lord, and that no matter the situation, no matter what you might think, no matter the narcissistic imprints of the culture, a child is a blessing. And if you find yourself in that position where you're trying to decide whether to have the baby or to have an abortion, please, 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 I would like you to consider the blessing that a child is. And no matter what situation that you are in, you can have that child, you can love that child, and you can avail yourselves of all the resources. You can have a successful happening when you have your child. You can be happy, and you can still attain those things that you want, albeit it might be a little harder. Yes, it might be sacrifices that you have to make, but the Bible says that a child is a blessing from the Lord. And the second thing I want to say is, those of you who have had an abortion, God can forgive you. God can restore you. God can make you feel new. He can take that guilt, and let me share with you, there is guilt in this. There are after effects. They're not talked about much. There is depression that happens after you have the abortion. There is soul searching. There is guilt that is involved with this. Don't be deceived. Many women I know who have had an abortion have dealt with this. So it is real. And to me, it's natural. It's a natural occurrence after you have an abortion to feel guilty about it, or to wonder if you have done the right thing. Now, some people drown that out because they feel that, it's something that they had to do, and then they get busy with life and they go about their business. But let me tell you that it will always be there with them. It will always be with you. But God can forgive you. All you have to do is come to him and say, Lord, I understand that I've taken a human life and that it is a sin before you, and I've hurt myself, but more importantly, I've hurt you because I've gone against what you would have me to do. And if you come to him humbly, the Lord will forgive you, give you a clean slate, and hopefully you will now follow in his ways and understand that abortion is wrong. And then you will be able to tell others, you'll be able to share your experience with others, and help those who are in the same situation that you found yourself in when you had an abortion. So the reason that I wanted to make this video is that in our culture, we don't often hear messages like this. We don't often hear about the downside of abortion. We don't actually hear what abortion actually is. And I want to make sure you guys at least got another perspective on it. Many of you will not agree with the things that I said, and many of you will think that I'm just speaking from political ideology, where actually I'm not. I'm just looking at the common sense realities of what we have in our country and what abortion actually is. And in my opinion, it's actually murder. And that murder is based on our own narcissistic tendencies in our society, and our wants to have everything convenient in our lives, and to be to have as problem-free life as we can. But in my opinion, we are missing out on a tremendous blessing when we kill the children that are not yet here, when we end their lives before they even start. So thank you for listening to this edition of Common Sense Christianity. If you like the video, please do like it. Please also subscribe to our podcast, and then hit the little bell icon where you will be informed when we have new content available. And then also, we want you to comment. We want to hear your comments on the video. We want to have a discussion with you, because this is your channel, and we want to make content that will be beneficial to you, and that will talk about things that might not necessarily be talked about all the time. This is your channel, and we want your feedback. I'll try to get back to as many people as I can in the comments. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and we may make a video based on the comments that we get. So this is your channel, and we want you to take as much opportunity as you like to participate in the things that go on in our channel. So thank you for listening. All of you are in my thoughts and prayers, and let's continue to talk about things that are common sense in our society, and we certainly look forward to seeing you next time.